Today I want to ask you about deadlift.
Okay.
I go many times in the gym and I see people deadlifting, increasing the weight all the time, resting. What is the benefit of a deadlift?
Well, again, in our course, in my book, we explain how it is that you can measure, evaluate how productive, how risky, how cost efficient, energy efficient each exercise is. And one of the things, one of the most basic things that we learn is that any limb, any lever, any body part, forearm, whatever, that is parallel to resistance is neutral. And the degree to which it moves away from the neutral position determines the percentage of load on that muscle, the muscle that controls that limb. When it's horizontal, when it's perpendicular resistance to gravity, that's when you get maximum resistance. So you can literally look at any exercise that's a free weight exercise, not a cable exercise, because that physics changes. But when you're dealing with free weight, you can look at anybody doing any exercise in the gym, and especially if you understand what muscles are connected to what limbs, you know what muscle is loaded. Okay, so when you look at a deadlift, assuming you're looking at it once they get into the descended position, right? Because when they're in the up position, everything's vertical, everything's neutral except for the trapezius, right? Because it's pulling down on the clavicle. So as soon as they start to drop their torso down, it's obvious that the limb, the lever, i.e. their torso, that is most away from the neutral position, that is most moving in the direction of horizontal, is the torso. So the question is, what muscle is causing that or controlling that torso, that limb, okay? And there are several. There is the erector spinae, the muscles that run alongside the spine, and they are the ones that basically prevent the spine from flopping forward, and they're also the muscles that create the arching of the back, okay? So they're certainly engaged because you're trying to not let your spine flop forward. Obviously, if you do, you'll herniate a disc. I mean, literally almost pull your spine apart. So they're working, right? And the muscle that's actually working the hip extension, because you can see that the hip joint is moving, right? The muscles that are moving the hip are the gluteus, the adductors, and the hamstrings. Okay. So from what I just described, you would have to be able to then ask the question, is it a good exercise for the erector spinae? Is it a good exercise for the glutes, hamstrings, adductors? And if so, how good compared to other alternatives? And what is the risk? Okay, so I'm not going to answer those just yet, but I will in just a few seconds. The first thing we have to recognize is the erector spinae has far less strength capacity than the glutes and the hamstrings and the adductors. The hip extension muscles are very powerful, right? So what ends up happening is you're doing a deadlift, and you've been told that you should keep what they call a neutral spine. Neutral spine just basically means you're keeping it arched, right? In order to prevent it from flopping forward, in order to prevent getting a herniated disc. And let's just say you're deadlifting 100 pounds. All right, well, your erector spinae can certainly handle 100 pounds. However, your gluteus, your hip extension muscles, are far more underwhelmed by that 100 pounds than your erector spinae are. In other words, they're much stronger. They can handle much more. So you add more weight. And then you add more weight, you add more, and eventually you add so much weight, because this is what you think you should do, is get to the point where you're lifting the maximum amount, right? Well, when you reach the maximum amount that your glutes and hip extension muscles can handle, it's already exceeded the amount the erector spinae can handle. Which means that when you watch someone getting into the heavy deadlifts, you'll notice that they are no longer keeping their spine perfectly arched. They are now, the erector spinae are failing at the ability to keep proper posture, and it is rounding, right? So people think that if they finish a set and they don't have instant back pain, that their spine didn't get injured. But that's false. You can injure your spine and not know you've injured it yet. You can herniate a disc. you can cause that bend in that spine to push out an intervertebral disc and distort it and create a bulge that's coming out to the side, to the back, and not know that it's happened until that bulge starts to hit a nerve. And then a year down the road, 2 years down, 3 years down the road, you may discover that you've got back pain and you won't know what caused it. But you created it 2, 3, 4 years ago because of all that deadlifting you were doing. And why were you doing it? Because someone told you that was beast mode. Someone told you that that's the way to develop power. Well, guess what? You can work your glutes and your hip extension muscles more without putting anything on your spine. Zero. So if you think that loading your spine with 200, 300, 400 pounds in the bent over position, herniating a disc, and in the upright position by compressing downward on that spine is the only way to get power in your glutes and hips and hip extension muscles, you're completely mistaken. You can get that and more with that multi-hip machine by just, you can lift the entire stack, which, by the way, because you're doing one leg at a time, allows you to be more powerful than you would with 2 legs at a time. Right? So the idea that you're working your what they call posterior chain muscles with a deadlift is foolish, frankly, because you can work your erector spinae better with dynamic exercise that actually moves your spine with much less weight and no potential strain, either compressive strain nor herniation strain. And you can work your hip extension muscles separately, harder, better, without the limitation of the weakness of the erector spinae. And then if you ever need those, when you need those two groups of muscles to work together, and they've been strengthened separately, they'll work just fine together. So that's the mistake with deadlifts, is the idea that the heavier the better. Look, if you want to work a deadlift and you want to work it with moderate weight and you can afford to keep your spine, it's a safe exercise, right? But chances are you're going to want to go into beast mode, right? Someone's going to challenge you. Someone's going to say, I can deadlift more than you. You go, oh yeah, you can. And then you step up to the plate, and next thing you know, you're doing as much as you possibly can and possibly damaging your spine without benefit to the muscles involved. Well, which I shouldn't say without benefit. They're certainly working, but without maximum benefit that could be achieved with a better, safer exercise.
And less injury.
And less injury risk.
So who should deadlift?
Well, again, anyone can deadlift if they want to, if they use good form and get some benefit. But again, I encourage people at all times to say, this is all nuanced. This is not black and white, right? This is degrees of good and degrees of bad. And it's comparative, right? So if you say this is a good exercise for, be prepared to have someone like me say, but is it better than this, this, and this? And I can guarantee you there are better exercises, meaning more productive and also more energy efficient and also safer for all the muscles that are involved in a deadlift.
And I think the purpose of the deadlift is to lift as heavy as possible in like the powerlifting and...
Well, certainly if you are a competitor in powerlifting, then you must deadlift. If you're a competitor in powerlifting, you must squat heavy. But I can tell you right now that squatting heavy and deadlifting heavy are two of the worst things you can do for your spine, long term. And if you're doing it for bodybuilding, or if you're doing it for fitness, there are far better choices, far better exercises that work the muscles better and with little or no risk of injury. You can literally, I in fact did win Mr. Universe without doing any squats or any deadlifts. I did, and you can look at my legs, you can look at my glutes, you can look at my quads, you can look at my hams, you can look at my erector spinae in that contest, and I guarantee you my fellow competitors did do deadlifts and squats. My erector spinae and legs are better than theirs, and I was the only person on that stage, I think it's safe to say, that didn't do heavy leg presses, heavy squats, or heavy deadlifts. So you do not need them for muscle development.
Oh, that's very good.
I'm sorry I'm going against the grain, but our goal here is not to preach more of the same. It's not to pretend that the emperor has clothes when the emperor actually has no clothes. Our objective here is to look at this thing in practical terms, in scientific terms, in mathematical terms, and determine what is better than what, and whether or not the amount of effort and energy we're spending in an exercise is productive, is worth doing as compared to better options. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure as always. Thank you.